Privacy is power. Privacy is a kind of power. That is true. That is very true. And activists on the left, libertarians too, because they're usually together on all the stuff I'm against. The left and libertarians both really care about privacy. And there's that libertarian strain of conservatism too. That get that government out of my way. I don't want the government knowing nothing about me. What, you want my social security number? Well, who gave me a number when I was born? Yeah, I'm not a fan of that sentiment generally. I think it's usually pretty stupid. How far can you take that, right? Because there have been dozens of books written about privacy rights. You can read them and get all of the reasons why it's important to protect our privacy, all of the ways our privacy is being violated right now, all of the dangerous people we can't trust with that information about us. And there's a lot of truth in a lot of that. I'm not going to deny any of that. There's a lot of changes we could make to make things more private and protect people's privacy that I would be behind, that I am in favor of. I don't need to make the case for any of that though, because it's already been made constantly, 24/7, by everyone everywhere. Okay? It's much harder to make the opposite case. So that's what I'm going to make for you today. Today I'm going to make the case of the limits of privacy. That is a reference, by the way, the name, The Limits of Privacy, to Amitai Etzioni's book of the same name. Amitai Etzioni is the first thing that comes up when you Google communitarianism. What's communitarianism, Dominic? I'll tell you. Communitarianism is like the opposite of libertarianism. So if you've noticed, I have a pretty strong communitarian strain within me. A pretty strong communitarian strain. I generally dislike both halves of libertarianism. The cultural half, the economic half, I dislike all of it. I'm more interested in positive uses of collective authority than I am in negative ones. Does that make sense? But I don't really go around calling myself a communitarian. I don't walk around and be like, people ask me what I believe, and I go, oh, I'm a communitarian. Because it's such a small group of intellectually type thinkers, and they have so few pragmatic policy proposals, and such, there's no movement, there's no political party, there's no issues to take a stance on from them, you know? They have very little that makes them up. It's mostly just Amitai Etzioni books. That's about it. But what does Amitai Etzioni say in those books? Well, in The Limits of Privacy, he argues that for public health purposes, and one of the examples he gives of public health purposes is HIV prevention, it's good sometimes to violate people's privacy to some extent, and in fact it's necessary. So, for example, testing for HIV in children is necessary to prevent the spread and to protect children from developing HIV. Parents might not like that. They might make an argument on privacy grounds that we shouldn't be testing everyone. We shouldn't be requiring that. It should be a voluntary choice that individual parents go through. You might be recognizing this as exactly the type of argument that gets made about masks. On the political right, masks and vaccines and other issues like that recently have become a big political issue because their emphasis of this issue is not necessarily vaccines bad, right? Yes, there is a portion of the population that does think vaccines bad, and obviously the issue of I should be able to choose whether to get a vaccine or not is more important to the people that actively think vaccines bad, okay? But there is also a portion of the population that thinks vaccines good, but you should be able to choose, right? You should be able to choose whether to get them or not. You should be able to choose whether to wear a mask or not. You should be able to choose whether to close down your business or not in the face of the spread of this virus, etc. And I'm talking about this post hoc. I'm talking about this too late which is good because you get to actually look back on the entirety of the situation and learn from it, you know, with the depth of hindsight, instead of just clickbaiting and giving people information on every timely issue, because you gotta beat everyone else to the punch to get the most goddamn clicks. Which is why I get no clicks. And I probably never will. Yeah, I'm against giving people the choice of whether to get fucking vaccinated or not. I'm not a fan of that, because as has been said a million times by liberals during the pandemic, it's not just you that it affects. You know, just because you're not actively murdering someone else or stealing their property doesn't mean that your individual actions are not affecting other people. A virus doesn't care about your individualism. It doesn't care. It doesn't care about your beliefs in individual freedom. It will spread from you to other people whether you like it or not. And so it's a collective problem whether you like it or not. And whether or not your child gets vaccinated affects the well-being of everybody. Because there was an area where a bunch of people didn't get vaccinated, and then we had a measles outbreak again. And that outbreak affected people who were not... I don't remember the details. I'm going to be honest right now. I don't remember the details of how any of this works. But suffice it to say, even if it doesn't affect you individually, it is important. It's important for collectivist reasons. So I have no inclination towards this individual freedom type argument on that front, and neither do most liberals at the moment. Most liberals are exhausted having to argue with people who place individual freedom over virus prevention. And that is Amitai Etzion's point exactly, that sometimes your individual freedom does not matter as much as that collective common good. That's why it's called communitarianism, because it places the community over the individual. It places this sort of communal authority over individual freedom. This also pertains for Amitai Etzioni to other things, including for him, anti-terrorism. So now we're doing something where it's probably going to disagree with the left, right? The left is very, very concerned with the civil liberty violations around, you know, anti-terrorist or terrorist prevention after 9/11, because they're concerned about racism and profiling. They're concerned about the civil liberties of Muslim Americans as a racial minority. They're concerned about privacy in general. Amitai Etzioni was making the case that we shouldn't be as concerned, that maybe those privacy violations are worth it if it prevents terror attacks. And given the depth of agreement I have with him on other issues, I'm inclined to at least possibly agree with him on that. Even though I'm left-wing and I should probably hate him and hate the Patriot Act and all of that stuff, I'm inclined to say that at least some amount of privacy violation might be necessary in some circumstances. Maybe you got to do a case-by-case basis, but still. So, what does this mean? Well, it means, and this is the thing, there are potentially a direction for reform. There is potentially a way to build a political movement that is anti-privacy in a way that creates positive good. A political movement for whom giving the state, giving authority more information that it needs to do its job effectively can be a positive force in the world, like an actively good thing. Good example of this is genetic databases. There's this police, they found this serial killer. I think it was the Golden State Killer or something, I forget. Doesn't matter. You're gonna get the point even if I don't have the fucking sources of the description. We're gonna call it the Golden State Killer. And they were able to find him because of modern genetic and DNA testing, and that genetic testing needed to be done on lots and lots of people. And their data and information about their genetic makeup needed to be given to the police And people don't like the police. Libertarians don't trust the police. The left hates the police, right? So the left really, really doesn't want the police to be given information. That's the last thing the left wants, because information is power. But this information also did things that the left might like. It stopped the police from having to profile people. It lowered the rates of wrongful incarceration because they knew genetically who did the crime and who didn't. So having this information actually led to a decrease in racism within the police force. At least debatably it did. So there are ways, theoretically, to go deeper with this, right? I've already talked about the possibility of a social credit system being a good thing as a way of more depthfully gathering information for a positive incentive system. Well, obviously one of the big concerns with that is a privacy concern, and now I'm building the philosophical foundations to overcome that privacy concern. Yeah, privacy bad, because we need, I think on a sort of a socialist level, we need to be able to overcome individual privacy rights in order to gather the information necessary for the state to do this, whatever stuff we want the state to do, even if we only want it to do very little. Whatever we want it to do, it needs to do it well. And in order to do it well, it has to have good information in order to overcome the sorts of information problems that people like Hayek and Mises launch against the state's ability to get things done. Another example is big data, right? Social media companies collect a lot of our data and a lot of our information, and they sell it to ad agencies and so on. But that information has also, in recent years, been used to create more depthful research. There's a book called Dataclysm, made by the founder of OkCupid, and has very depthful research on people's dating habits, because they no longer need to take them into a controlled laboratory setting and then ask them survey questions about their dating, which people lie on. Now, we could actually bring people, just let people do what they actually do, not even thinking about them being observed. You're not thinking about your dating habits being observed when you're just swiping on OkCupid, right? And we can take that information that we get from those behaviors on that site, and we can learn from it. We can learn who's lying. We can learn the truth without having to use survey questions for this research. So then, there's another layer to this too. Social media sort of moderation, right? In order to do moderation, there needs to be a kind of privacy violation going on the parts of the people looking at all of these images, right? Because you're posting these images just for your friends or whatever. But Facebook has to have a guy look at all of them and then figure out whether or not it's terrorism, or hyper-violent porn, or hate speech, or misinformation, or anything that social media company decides to get rid of. Yep, there we go. So, here's one implication for this idea. Alright? What if we changed the nature of law so that instead of being so formalist, where we're focusing on the word of the law, what if we made it more human? And what if the way we did this was by making it more like social media regulation, where individual human beings judge whether something is porn or not with their eyes and their own human judgment? Oh. Oh. Oh, that makes you lightheaded, doesn't it? Not worth it for the chaos. Don't hang upside down, kids, not even once. Our law right now depends on thick definitions. it's hard for us to apply certain types of laws, like, for example, in social media regulation right now, there have been a lot of people who have been trying to get rid of algorithms that feed people into echo chambers, suggestion algorithms. And so in order to do that, they've had to try and call for bans on algorithms. And that can mean anything. Anything that allows a social media site to function is an algorithm. So because they lack a clear definition, a lot of the opponents of these bills have argued, you can't do that. What's an algorithm? And sure, yeah, that's a good argument in the short term, but isn't their goal noble? Isn't what they're trying to do just? Isn't it good that they want to prevent social media corporations from hijacking the minds of our children and shoving them into echo chambers and keeping them glued to their screens while they can sell them ads for days while they just sit in their bedrooms alone, losing time and losing the meaningfulness of their life? Isn't that a good goal? Did we forget that's a good goal that they're trying to do? We shouldn't be celebrating that there are clear limitations based on the fact that it's difficult to define algorithm on what a system of authority like the state can do about a problem like that. No, we should be trying to overcome the limitations. We should be trying to figure out, how do we solve this problem? Instead of looking for ways that the state can't possibly solve it, we should be trying to find ways to solve it. And one way to solve those definitional problems that come up so often in government, and enforcement problems, and nuance problems, information problems, more or less, that come up over and over and over again whenever anybody tries to use governmental authority to pursue any kind of a positive aim whatsoever. One way of doing that is to violate privacy and make things more human. More human judgment on individual situations with a more depthful knowledge of the information going on in that situation allows you to make a clearer judgment between one type of thing and another type of thing. And that allows authority to function. The law can be more like social media moderation. It can be more like human beings sitting in a room in front of a computer telling you whether or not something is porn or not, instead of just throwing up our hands and going, well, there's no way to say for sure. It doesn't have a clear, stable definition, so we give up. That's what so much of this boils down to. I'm not gonna give up.